I welcome you. I'm Joanna Seeley, chairperson for People for the Playa. And we're really glad that you took time out from your busy schedules to join us for this presentation today. To start things off with, Pledge of Allegiance. Our flagmen today are Navy veterans Greg Cahy and Hazard Hawk. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, gentlemen. Today's monitors, Lou Men. I can never pronounce it. Manuta. He is representing People for the Playa. Steve Kissel, groundwater stewards, Cochise groundwater stewards, and Christian Sawyer, and he is representing the Ground Party Papers. Ground Party Papers. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Other members and volunteers today are Deb Hawk, she'll be the timer. And we have Janet Minuta in the back in the sign up, and Joanne Weiner, she's also on the back table. I want to thank Loretta, she is in charge of Sunsides Community Center. She was so gracious to help us get this set up on Wednesday when we did a test run. Greg Stotts, he is with the new Sunsides Welcome Center here in Sunsides. He's going to be doing a video today, as well as we have another video up here. And we're new to this video stuff, so please bear with us. And now for our guests. We have, let me get out of the way here so everybody can see. We have Frank Antonori. He's our Republican representative. Joy Banks is our Democrat representative. Two independent representatives is Jacob Karchner and Patsy Nyberg. So without further ado, let's get started.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Lou Minuta, and I'm a member of People for the Playa. And I just wanted to quickly go over the rules for our candidate forum today. We have questions that we are going to be asking the candidates, all dealing with water, the proposed lithium mine, development, things along those lines. And we're going to be projecting the questions up on the screen so everybody can follow along. And for example, Frank is going to get our first question, and he's going to have 2 minutes to answer. And when he has 30 seconds left, Deb is going to show him the yellow card that he's got 30 seconds left to respond. And then we're going to go down the line. Each candidate will answer each question and get the same time period. But for the second question, it will be Joy, and then we'll go down the line that way. We want to keep it as fair and even as possible. And we have Christian here. If there's any follow-ups or clarifications to the questions, Christian will be able to help us out with that. And we're hoping to go about an hour and a half with the questions that we have already prepared. but everyone who's here should have been handed an index card. And if you'd like to ask a question, we have two volunteers. I believe it's going to be Greg and Hazard walking around, and just put your hand up with the card and they'll pick it up and bring it up here, and we'll be able to ask your question from here, and hopefully do that for about a half an hour and wrap up about 3 o'clock. That's our goal for today. Trying to think if there's anything else. There are candidate brochures and materials on the back table, and also there is a petition that was here about the proposed changes to the flight patterns. If you want to sign that to be opposed to it, I believe that's what the petition is for. That's separate from what we're working on here. So that's we also have coolers of ice cold water, if anybody needs any. We have four coolers for all of that. And see, did I forget anything?
The red card.
Oh, well, right, the red card at the end of 2 minutes. Deb is going to hold up the red card, and they'll know that they need to complete their answer. So we want this to be as informative and educational as possible. Joanna was saying that we are recording it, and so we're hoping to post that on our website as soon as possible. So if you know people who weren't here, or if you want to watch it again, it will be available. So now that I remember everything. Okay.
I mentioned Greg Stotts is good. Greg, where are you going to post the video that you're doing?
This will be available at the library.
Okay, so there'll also be a bit at the library if you have any neighbors that want to see it.
Could everyone hear Lou as he was talking?
Yeah, we think we got the mics working pretty well.
You said no in the back
No?
there? Maybe a little closer.
A little closer, we can do that? Is that better? All right.
You need to eat a mic.
So, all right, without further ado, Steve is going to ask the first question, and we'll keep moving along.
Thank you. The first question, can everybody read that okay? Okay, so we're going to leave that up during the question, so it reminds each of you. The candidates, we're going to start with Frank Antinori first this time. They'll have 2 minutes. So if any of you have been out to the websites of the candidates, you'll know that they've included statements on those websites that the groundwater issue is a very important issue across the county, not just here in the Wilcox Basin. But we're asking them to focus on the Wilcox Basin today, and we're going to ask them to please summarize their understanding of the problem here, including rate of depletion, primary causes, and the consequences. So, Frank.
What about their bios? I thought they were.
Oh, yep.
Excuse me. Yes, each of you have 1 minute to introduce yourselves. I'm sorry.
Oh,
and then we'll get to that question.
All right.
So, Frank, 1 minute. Yeah,
All right.
1 minute starting now.
I'm Frank Antinori. I'm a retired 20-year veteran of the U.S. Army, Special Forces, combat veteran of three wars. I got 2 Bronze Stars from those altercations. I retired here 20 years ago to Arizona, where I got a job working for a major aerospace company. I'm a program director out there managing research and development programs. I've got a master's in business with an emphasis in project management. I was also an Arizona State Senator for 4 years between 2008 and 2012. I was the Senate Majority Whip during the biggest budget crisis that we had in Arizona, and was part of the team that worked to get the budget balanced after the housing crash of 2008. I got a wife, Leslie. I got 2 grown sons, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
Hi, my name is Joy Banks. I live on the other side of Cochise County near Huachuca City. My husband and I have been here for 30 years. We have 9 children. We have an electrical contracting business in Huachuca City. And from 27 to 2020, I was on the Huachuca City Council because I happened to live in town during those years. And I learned a lot of things there. And I feel like that experience gives me an edge here with becoming a supervisor, and I deeply appreciate the fact that you want to hear from us about this most important issue. And I feel like this is so big and so deep that I don't know. But I'm so glad you're here, and I'm just going to give you the things that I can from my heart and from the things that I've read. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Jacob Karchner. I'm a lifelong resident here in Cochise County. My family's been here like 135 years or something like that. My family's always been involved in agriculture, and we've always had a family passion for service, whether it be a lot of my family went into the medical field, but myself and several others also went into law enforcement, and then education is huge in my family as far as being teachers and whatnot. I graduated school here in St. David and attended Cochise College. My wife JJ, she and I own the Mescal movie set. We also have a ranch over there outside of Benson, and we've got 2 kids, 2 grandkids, and my focus here is to preserve what Cochise County is that our previous ancestors have made for us, so that the future generations can continue to enjoy it.
Hi everyone, and candidates, welcome to my town. So I've been living here for over 15 years. My husband Carl and our son KJ moved here from Cave Creek, and I moved here to teach. I've taught in 6 different school districts around the county, and I retired 3 years ago. I got into real estate about 4.5 years ago, which I continue now. I know an awful lot about water. I can pick a well out on a map that's tiny in 1 minute. And I know a lot about our water issues. We live off-grid. We catch water, we haul water. There's a lot more people hauling water in town now since we've lived here. It's waiting in line now. So we are in a crisis. It's great that this is available, and so people can make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, let's go back to Frank here. So,
One heck of a noisy microphone.
yeah, there is a button on there that says standby. You can, when you're passing it back and forth, you can just flip that one way and then the other.
There you go.
Can everyone hear me okay?
It's
Okay.
shaky, rattly, that's all.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
it is like that. Once you start talking, it's fine. Okay, so we'll go back to the first question again. Frank Antonori will have 2 minutes, and then pass the mic to Joy, and then Jacob, and then Patsy. And the first question is, again, to remind everyone, focusing on the Wilcox Basin, please summarize your understanding of the problem here, including rate of depletion, primary causes, and consequences. Thank you. Go, Frank.
So I'm a data guy. I work with engineers and really smart people, so some of that's rubbed off on me, and I allow sort of the evidence and the science drive sort of the decision making that I make. Just simply doing a little bit of research, and it doesn't take much to do some research on it. You can see that non-livestock-based agriculture is sucking down the vast majority of the water in the Wilcox Aquifer, followed by some of the other agricultural businesses in there. Residential is a small portion, municipal is a small portion, but the net recharge is less than that number. So we are clearly depleting both the groundwater and the aquifer. There's no doubt that data clearly shows that. The question would be is how do we solve that problem? And I'm sure there's going to be subsequent questions related to that. And I think there's going to be a multi-phased approach, and that's the only way you can do it. And it's going to be slowly bringing both sides of this issue sort of towards the center as best as possible. I don't have a dog in this fight other than I own land right up here off of Dragon Road, and I have my own well. And as I was telling some people, I just dumped $7,200 into a new well pump because that pump was 20 years old. So I know how expensive it is to maintain a well. So we're going to have to look at some alternatives to drilling lots of wells, and I've got a couple ideas that I want to approach with that to try to reduce the demand on the aquifer. And then we have to do some other things regarding recharge. A lot of them, when I was in the legislature, we tried to do with the San Pedro River Valley, and we were fought by the Department of Engineering, the Army Corps of Engineers rather, and a lot of environmentalist groups that didn't want us putting swales and ditches in. to try to increase the recharge rate. But it's at a point now where I think we need to start pushing that issue again to help with those problems. So I look forward to having a further discussion, but we do have an imbalance, and the solution is based on bringing down the demand and increasing the recharge. And that's the discussion that I think everybody needs to have. Thanks.
All right, I read this whole report, the supply and demand from ADWR, and I'd just like to start off with what they've said. As of 2018, all the available water estimated to be in storage to 409 feet depth, which is the average well depth in the Wilcox Basin, has been withdrawn. It is gone. So every number that they have showing the aquifer, they're all negative numbers, and they're just getting more negative as you go. So the amount of recharge could never, ever, ever touch the overdraft that has already occurred, let alone the overdraft that will continue to occur. Now that water is very deep, and as I read through this report, and I've got it, I mean, the negative supply and demand balance exists every single year, meaning more water leaves the basin than enters, mainly due to agriculture, which makes up 90% of the water demand. So for every acre foot of supply in the basin, 3 acre feet were leaving the basin, which I'm sure you're all familiar with these numbers, but actually doing the research and reading this is it's just stunning. It's stunning. And so I'm thinking, well, how much water is left down there? And everyone needs to understand that this is it. This is how it is. I don't think there is, your question, let's see, primary causes, consequences. We'll move on to those other questions that will get into depth as what you do about it. I don't really know, but just that is the case here on the ground, and it is very, very alarming. Thank you.
So we're gonna run down this question. We're gonna run this question down piece by piece. So my understanding of the problem here regarding the rate of depletion, depending on which hydrology study you look at, and it's anywhere from inches to feet on an annual basis that the water level is declining. My understanding of the water problems here are a little bit less than my understanding of the water problems over in the San Pedro Valley, because I am very involved in those ones over there. And we need to concentrate on the issues throughout the county. But the primary causes, there's only one primary cause, and that's just overdraft by the users. The consequences, of course, are we have multiple aquifers that we're depleting, and every one of them is the studies have shown that the first aquifer that sits at 100 feet is almost gone. The one that sits at 400 feet, like Joy just said, is depleting. And then, of course, once you go lower and lower, there's several different underground lakes underneath us here. So we need to understand that. We need to also understand that by these overdrafts, they can help, they're not helping, but they're one of the root causes of the ground subsidence that's going on here in the county. And so we need to take all of that into consideration, from the deepest water that we can reach all the way to the surface, and try and balance that.
Depletion, primary causes, and consequences. So we're at a 4-to-1 for the groundwater depletion. 1 is the recharge rate. I think that was the last statistic that I read. When we moved here it's been 10 years since this kind of started to ramp up. And I think we here all know what happened 10 years ago out that way. And that's the big elephant in the room, and nobody wants to mention it, no one wants to talk about it. So I want more and more or less recharge areas by development. Climate does fall into this. This year we had pretty good monsoon. Last year it was really bad. And the year before we had bumper crop of rain. So it's now, we can't be certain of our rain to recharge. What are the consequences of this? Well, also let me just mention about agriculture inefficient water use. We have a lot of small farmers that are irrigating responsibly. We have Mr. Curry who is developing new ways of irrigation and also drought-resistant crops. But down my road, Desert Road, we have a farm that used to be Tingle's farm, watering goat heads. This is really causing a lot of problems, including fissures. We've had that last week with the fissure problem down on Arabian.
Thank you. Everybody stayed in the time limit. Great job.
Well, thank you, everyone. So the second question that we have, we're going to start with Joy, and it is, Steve, close. There we go. Yeah, I think everyone can hear me. You just have to talk a little closer to the mic. Can you please describe your position regarding the appropriate role of the state in protecting our groundwater?
That's question 2.
Question 2.
Yeah, we changed a few questions
Oh,
order a little
I'm
bit.
so sorry. I'm looking at my printed questions,
Yeah.
which is like,
I'm sorry, I thought I
okay.
told you.
And I cannot see the question, so,
Oh,
okay.
so what is the role of the state in protecting
State.
our groundwater?
Okay, so that's question 3. Okay. It's all in statute. I mean, if we want to really change things up, we have to go to the state legislature that ADWR has that capacity. But there's a lot that counties can do. I just don't know if in this situation, any efforts for recharge or any conservation efforts are really gonna make a huge difference. This basin is in dire straits. Like I say, this is the first I've really understood what ADWR has reported on as the actual conditions here. I'm still learning, I'm still listening, I'm still looking for those solutions. I'm in favor of anything the county can do, of course, absolutely. It's in the comprehensive plan that there's water conservation, that, it says Cochise County should develop additional water conservation and management policies to be applied to all new development, et cetera, et cetera. But again, as Patsy mentioned, the elephant in the room is the agricultural uses. That is 90% of the water use in this basin. So I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. I'm not going to say, except that the way things are going, I mean, every graph I look at is a downward trend of water that's accessible to the people. So what water is left, people are going to have to decide whether it's the state in conjunction with local landowners, which I hope is what's going to happen. ADWR, I think, is going through some changes. They have been tasked with making these reports for every basin in Arizona, and thankfully they did. Wilcox was one of the first, so these are numbers that we've never, I don't know if anyone has ever had before. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we really need to try and remember here is that there are 3 main economic drivers for Cochise County, and that's tourism, Fort Huachuca, and agriculture. That being said, I think that we really need to sit down as a group. I also sit on the Cochise Grand Cattle Growers Water Committee, and so right now we're in the process of coming up with a position paper. As cattle growers, we need to sit down with Farm Bureau, we need to sit down with the local farmers, we need to sit down with the residents, we need to sit down with the municipalities, And we need to come up with a local solution, because if we do not come up with a local solution, the state will step in and they will mandate certain things that nobody in this room, nobody in the agriculture industry, nobody in the ranching industry can live with. We're all going to be limited, we're gonna be pretty much shut down if we cannot come up with a local solution. So the role of the state is that they technically, according to Arizona by statute, they own the water. But we as water users should come up with a solution here locally so that we can preserve, again, what made Cochise County one of the economic drivers for Cochise County, and that is, make sure that we can sustain not only our agriculture, but also our residents and our lives.
I believe the appropriate role of the state in protecting our groundwater resources is crucial. Given the essential nature of water for public health, agriculture, and ecosystems. And here are some key points that I believe they're responsible for. Regulations and oversight. The state should establish regulations to protect our groundwater. Data collection and management. They should invest in data collection to understand groundwater resources better. This would include some type of monitoring. We don't know how much water is coming out. We don't know how much is being pumped. So we have to know that before we can manage it. And we have to, all of our choices need to be driven by data. How do we know how to conserve if we don't know how much we're using? We have to have transparency. We've got to have public awareness and education. We have to let the public know what's going on before it happens. And that's been a real problem here in the county. One would argue against the state being in control. I believe we should have local control of our water. I am not for state program mandates of AMAs or INAs in any means. Property rights approach. Perhaps we can, groundwater could be managed through a system of property rights, where landowners have rights over the water beneath their land, subject to regulations that prevent over-extraction and ensure sustainable use. So I believe there are creative approaches without that we can keep our control of our water locally, and I think that's the way we should be doing that.
I think there's a lot the state can do. The problem is you have this phenomenon up there called rural ignorance, and I dealt with it when I was up there because 22 out of the 30 legislative districts are centered around Maricopa and Pima County. So you only really have about 8 LDs that have representation that represent the rural part of the state of Arizona. So you're always battling the state of Maricopa, as they call it up there, to try to get them to do anything. The biggest thing, I'm a big fan of incentive versus stick, right? I think to motivate people to do the right thing is better than punishing people to do the wrong thing. So one of the things the state could do is create incentives, especially for the agriculture folks. I think Joy had mentioned about some of the efforts some of the agriculture guys are making to reduce water through smart irrigation and other things. Providing tax incentive for the capital investment that those guys need to make to buy that equipment is something that should come from the state. Those guys should eliminate the tax burden, sales tax burden that's on these farmers trying to buy the equipment to reduce their demand on water. That should be number one. Number two, we should also look at other tax incentives to encourage smart water usage, including metering some of the wells here and regulating some of the wells with regard to water pumping, and creating incentive for farmers to do that and ranchers to do that. Ranching is actually not that big of an impact at all on the water. It's mostly the feed that's grown and the trees and the pistachios. And I love pistachios, but a lot of that is finding a smarter way to irrigate that and providing incentive for those guys to invest and put in the capital investment to reduce that water demand is something the state clearly can do. The other thing the state can do is provide us grants. And I know that especially when it comes to funding a local water district here to provide the infrastructure for people to tap into, so if you don't have a well, or if your well goes dry, you have the option to hook up to a water line. And I'll tell you, like I said, I just dropped $7,200 on a new well pump. If I had a water pipe running through the front of my house, I would have rather spent that money hooking up to a water main, so I had a guaranteed supply of water for the rest of the time I live up there. So I look at some of these other options, and I think the state can provide a lot of assistance there.
Thank you for those answers. Okay, the third question we have shifts a little bit to the role of the county in terms of economic development and water. So we understand that the Board of Supervisors has a limited role in groundwater protection in some ways, but what do you see as the county's role in promoting economic development and sustainable land use while helping to maintain our quality of life and long-term water security? And Jacob, you'll be the first to answer.
Well, the short answer would be is during the planning and development, in that comprehensive plan, we need to go make sure that we are taking into consideration water availability and water sustainability when we approve new development. And that goes for residential developments, that goes for industrial developments, it goes for everything. As far as what the Board of Supervisors can do, you know, there's a lot of things that we can do as far as reaching out and finding some sort of, you know, Frank has a good idea. Maybe we can incentivize people to do rainwater catchments. We can incentivize, you know, we can fast track some of these recharge projects throughout the county. I've got a good friend that did a recharge project, and he did it through, the county took part of the burden, and then the rest of it was paid for by grants. And now the water recharge project that he has on his property has increased. I believe he said the aquifer right there in his area down in Hertford, it's increased at 18 inches. So if we can incentivize that type of project for a recharge, if we can incentivize some sort of projects for water catchments, if we can incentivize also water conservation. Conservation is going to be huge when it comes down to it. So that's how we can do it, is we can incentivize those conservation practices.
So, as Jacob mentioned, the key word is sustainability. For any development or we've got to prioritize the developments that are compatible with sustainable water use, such as low impact agriculture, ecotourism. I keep talking about tourism. In 2023, Arizona's tourism tax revenue surpassed $4 billion. And that type of development for Cochise County could be huge. And I said it in the meeting the other day. The great thing about tourism is tourists come in, they spend their money, and they go back home. So, you know, we don't need new houses or wells. We should be planning zoning and land. I believe that our county zoning could use a little bit of an overhaul. We should have land use policies that limit high water use industries in areas with that scarce resource, which is Sulphur Springs Valley. We should prioritize any kind of industry or development that are compatible with sustainable water use, such as low, and having renewable energy projects. We should invest in water infrastructure and advocate for improvements with innovations in water supply. And as technology advances, we can learn new methods of conservation. We should give economic incentives for businesses and developers that prioritize water efficient practices. This could include tax breaks or grants, like Frank was mentioning. And we need monitoring. We need monitoring and research to know how much water is being used. And Kathy's shaking her head again.
The biggest impact is clearly through zoning and permitting, which the county has significant control over. So, particularly the permitting process. So a lot of the new construction permits come out, the county can put in certain water conservation requirements in new construction. Permitting for other industries, whether it's agriculture, such as like new orchards or other types, are going to be difficult because of the state laws that govern the use of those lands. Also, anything else that's already out there is already grandfathered in, so the county has very limited ability to deal with the regulation of existing businesses out there. Residential is a drop in the bucket, so doing conservation at the residential level isn't really going to have an impact. So even if you tell everybody to put in low flush toilets and shower heads, it's not going to really have a difference at all. So it's very limited on that perspective. The construction side, when I say construction, I mean really when it comes down to capturing water and recharging water. And again, we've got to work with the state and the federal government to solve this problem. And I can understand, the 20 years I've lived in Arizona, why we allow so much water to run off and evaporate in this state. Why we don't have catchments and ditching and swales to allow that water to collect and then have recharge piping to push that water as quickly as possible down into the aquifer so it doesn't evaporate. And we have been fought by the state and the federal government every step of the way when we've tried to do those projects here in the county. We need to start pushing back and working with the legislature and the federal government to make sure that we are given the ability to do those projects here in Cochise County to improve recharge. We have to improve recharge. That is the only way to negate this problem or to reduce the impact of this problem. Without that, we are in big trouble. Without bringing an outside source of water in, which is a long-term perspective that's going to be very expensive.
Thank you. Before we move to the next. Oh, I'm sorry, Joy.
Okay, the county has a lot to say about water conservation. They've got pages in their current comprehensive plan. There's lots of incentives already in place, but I agree, there needs to be way more incentives, especially for businesses. And with the new port of entry in Douglas, that's gonna open up the 80 acres that Douglas gave to the federal government to open the Douglas commercial port of entry to the west of Douglas, that's gonna send traffic right up here. Now, some of it I have heard is gonna go on Route 80, maybe through St. David and that way, but 191 is the way that it should go, because that's pretty much a straight shot. And there is also a rail spur up there going to the power generating plant. And perhaps, I don't know, I haven't talked to Union Pacific yet, but I will in the future to see about a rail spur, maybe even a rail track coming down to the new commercial port of entry. I can't tell you how much that's going to change everything in this valley. Some of it's going to be changes that are positive in that there's going to be more jobs. There's going to be manufacturing jobs, warehousing jobs, things like that. Anything retail sales. Of course, it will be closer to Douglas, but who knows how far that, this whole corridor could be full of warehouses. And I would say Cochise County could actually require that every single new residence or new commercial building have water catchment into water tanks that are bought by the county or someone else. They harvest all of that water into tanks to keep it clean. It could be used for fire suppression, and that's really all I can think of. But that new port of entry may change things and maybe would require less water use than the intensive agriculture that's going on right now. I hate to say that, but I don't know, maybe that's a solution to some of these things. It's not a good one.
Steve.
We have one, Christian's gonna ask a follow-up question.
A fun bonus round here. I think this will be my only follow-up question, because I will probably ask difficult questions and I don't want to make it too unfun for all of us here. But let me ask at least 2 pointed questions that I hope I can get direct answers from you guys on. And let me give a little bit of background. As some of you guys said, recharge is really, it's important. It's a drop in the bucket as well. And there's been positive motion in that regard. We have a $300,000 grant right now on the county level that's looking at the Wilcox Basin for where the best sites for recharge projects will be, and another $350,000 to do a recharge project at Turkey Creek. And we're already starting the preliminary studies on that. That's through NRCD for Turkey Creek, and through the county for the basin-wide study. But it's almost sad that we're going to do all this work and pour all this money into recharging our aquifer when the amount that we're taking out right now can just keep going higher and higher as well. So, and given that only the state has the ability to limit or cap and prevent the expansion of new water use, to me it seems no matter what we do locally and no matter what we do in terms of incentivizing efficiency and low water use, which are all great things as well, at some point you have to do what Douglas did back in 1965, Ed Curry's dad, Noel Curry, which is say, hey state, we need some hard and fast limitations on the expansion of agriculture because we got a lot more people moving in and we're all suffering from overdraft. So given all that, I mean, do you see, first of all, here's the questions. Do you believe that we should be trying to stabilize our water tables eventually? I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm not saying drastically, but eventually we need to get our demand and our supply in balance so that the water levels stop going down, ideally in a timely way. And 2, do you see some way of doing that without state intervention? And let me give one more piece of context here. I'm currently in a lawsuit with ADWR, and one of the pieces of evidence that they're fighting against me with is comments from Tri-Nuts, who are one of the California-based investment companies who own a bunch of the orchards, right? And they said, dear ADWR, please allow for the long-term depletion of our aquifers because that's in our agricultural economic interest. And similar comments from the Farm Bureau and Riverview. So it's, I don't know, I hope that that is a good enough piece of evidence that's saying incentivization and local projects are not enough to curb the increase in demand, because you have entities who are here to use as much water as they can, as quickly as they can. They're not going to voluntarily reduce their water use. They've explicitly said, please let us deplete your aquifer. Okay, big question. That's why I'm only asking one. And I don't know if we want to put a time limit for all of them, but I'd say 30 seconds.
Should we stabilize the water?
The question is, should we stabilize our water tables? Is there a way to do that without the state? And if there's not, what can we do with this state? Should we have an INA? You know, like give a little more nuance here, and in my opinion, a little more reality of how we actually address this problem.
We'll start.
Thank you, guys.
Patsy, did you start that one?
I did, yeah.
Okay, go ahead and start.
And I have 5 minutes, right?
Maybe like at least a minute. It's a big question.
I need at least 2.
Go ahead with
Yeah.
it.
I think it should be just like the Adams question.
Great.
So, yeah, I absolutely agree with Christian. You know, talking about recharge, it's going to be minimal. And this problem started in 2014. Before that, we still had small agriculture, we still had vineyards, we still had new vineyards coming in, and that produce, that agriculture, a lot of it stayed here. I know it's a business, so of course it gets exported. I am for farming. I'm for small family farms. Okay, that's not what's going on with Tri-Nut. That's not what's going on with Riverview. And they're pushing out small family farms. And they're doing that by drilling the wells so deep that nobody can afford. You know, nobody, when the water gets down below a certain, you know, if it's below 1,000 feet, nobody's gonna be able to drill that far or afford to pump the water out. So the feasibility of recharge, I really think we have to reduce the pumping. And that's the big question. By involving the state, now I know the AMA maybe would have put a stop to future drilling, but what's happening right now, you know, I think it's you know, once you put in a law, it's hard to go back and say, okay, we're gonna change that now. They've got a lot of money, they've got a lot of lawyers, and once something's in place, it's gonna be really hell to try to reverse it, I believe. I really think that we've really got a problem. The Turkey Creek recharge would be great, but I have 2 reports that the water is not flowing in Turkey Creek this year. And we've had ample rain to let it do that. So where's that water going? That's what we really need to look at. Are there fissures there? I've had other reports and I can't verify them, so I won't say where that water might be going. But there's a lot to look into.
So it depends on how ambitious you want to be with the solution. The more ambitious, the more cost. Again, back in 2010, the legislature funded a study to look at an interstate compact between Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona to pipeline water from the Mississippi River Basin Flood Control District along the I-20, I-10 corridor and along the I-40 corridor to Arizona. You're looking at about $1 million to $2 million per mile to put in a water pipeline. If we had started that project 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago, when we had this idea, and people say, oh, it's ambitious, it's crazy, but the Central Arizona project was deemed ambitious and crazy, but somehow the state and the feds found the money to do that project. I think if you're serious about the long-term issue, and I agree that you are not going to get there by just doing recharge and low flush toilets. The real solution is bringing the water in. And outside of the aquifer water is the only way to stop the depletion of the aquifer and the only way that you're going to restore the aquifer, period. The only way to do that is to work with the state and federal government and do that interstate compact and look at putting in water pipelines. California's been running water pipelines out through Los Angeles. Las Vegas is running water pipelines. It is not outside the reach of the people in this state, as well as West Texas, who is also in favor, obviously, of getting a water pipeline going through Texas, as well as New Mexico, to start looking at that project. So we need to start pushing that solution. It's not overly ambitious or out of the question. And it's actually somewhat feasible, and at $1 to $2 million a mile, now is the time to do it, because if we wait 10 years, it'll be $4 million a mile. We could have done it, again, like I said, 10 years ago when it was probably $1 million or less a mile. But we keep waiting until we get to this point, and this is where we're suffering. So we need to have an ambitious approach to solve that problem.
Okay. Again, ADWR has been tasked with making reports for every basin. So we have more data in front of us than we've ever had. So I think that's important to recognize that the dire conditions of the aquifer here were probably known by some, but they need to be known by everybody, okay? I know Patsy just alluded to the fact that this didn't start until 2014. No. According to page 16 of this report that I have, there's a summary of the Wilcox total demand and supply values from 1990 to 2022. Supply, let's see, the available water in storage was 2.966 million acre feet. Okay, that year, supply was 67,700 acre feet. That was the supply put into the aquifer. The demand was 138,000 acre feet. So there was overdraft occurring even as far back as 1990. And so it's just, there was a lot of water. And so it's been depleted over the years. Since 2014, it's been depleted faster because the wells that were already in place in 2014 were deepened, more wells were drilled. And so it's just become faster. That's all I see from the data so far.
I get to respond because she mentioned my name, so
Hold
can
on,
I
Pat.
respond?
You can do it in your time in the next question.
So the short answer is yes, we need to stabilize the water table, and can we do it without state intervention? No. I'm a little bit of a history buff, my family's been here a little while, so I go back even further. So in the 40s and 50s, if you drive up and down the Sulphur Springs Valley, you'll see a bunch of old concrete ditches, and there was a lot of truck farms and a lot of things going on back then. Well, in the 60s is when they started having their first water woes, and everybody moved into town, and that's when things really started. As of right now, transferring water from another basin is illegal in the state of Arizona. You cannot transfer water from one basin to another. Recharge and conservation, I agree with you, Christian, they are both a drop in the bucket, but they are an essential part of what we need to do. I believe that what we need to do is we need to have local input. We need to get the majority of our shareholders together to go to the state and create that legislation that we can all live with, because without us getting together and allowing the state of Maricopa to come in and just dictate what we can do with our water down here, we need to come up with that solution here and take it to the state. Even if TriNut isn't in on it, even if Riverview, if we can get the majority of our shareholders together and then go to the state with an idea and an outline of what we want, that's how we accomplish this.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, who's getting this first?
Oh, this will go, I guess, to Frank.
To Frank, yeah, back to you, Frank. Okay, all right.
All right, so our next question, as you can see on the slide, is what kinds of growth and economic development are appropriate in an area with limited water supplies, such as the Wilcox Playa? Well, Wilcox Basin, excuse me.
So one of the things, I was talking to quite a few farmers and ranchers around here. If you want to expand industry, they got to be agriculture related for this part of the county. It's just that simple. We got the wineries, we got the dairy, we got cattle growers out here, we got farmers growing all sorts of crops out here. Agriculture could be the hub for Wilcox, the city of Wilcox itself. Why we don't have a cattle and dairy processing facility there, and everybody's got to ship their milk to Phoenix, their cows to Phoenix, their everything to Phoenix is just beyond me. We should have that industry here. That industry generates tax revenue. That tax revenue offsets the requirement of some of these heavy agricultural industries that would be lost, let's say, if the water were to evaporate or dry up. It would also provide an opportunity to create an economic balance. Right now, we don't have that economic balance. We are heavily agriculture in this part of the county and very limited on the industry side. So job creation in that sector is critical. Expanding, again, the agriculture that uses low water is probably a good approach, and those sort of industries are a lot of the wineries and some of the cattle grazing and growing and whatnot does not. The data shows they don't use a lot of water. It's the mass irrigation stuff. Finding a way to offset that and a different way to grow, other technologies that we can bring in there to efficiently do that, to grow those types of industries would also be something in this valley to do development. I have other ideas for the other side of the county, near the Pima County line. I think there's an opportunity to bring in some tech industry, commercial, technical type industries along that corridor there, because I-10, the rail line, State Road 90, and the airport there presents a lot of economic opportunity that are not agriculture related in that part of the county. But in this part of the county, you have to use agriculture-based approaches, and creating a hub for everybody in the region to feed into, and Wilcox should be the focus. And Wilcox has suffered population loss and economic decline because no one has had the vision to push for having those types of industries and facilities in Wilcox.
So again, with this new port of entry, this could really change the face of Sulphur Springs Valley and Wilcox and give a lot more diversity to businesses there. But you come back to the fact, there is not, to build a new subdivision in this valley, it's not gonna happen. You don't have a 100-year supply guaranteed. So, in order to solve that, it's gonna have to be, municipal water. And the county can actually begin municipal water supply for residents. It's something that's included in the comprehensive plan. It's included in the Arizona statutes. 67A, a municipal water provider as defined in section 48-5901, with what water is left. And that's the discussion that I can't have here today with you, but I'm going to be learning about it. But the water that is left, what is Wilcox, what is this basin, what is Pierce Sunsight's gonna do with the water that is left? And again, any amount of recharge, any amount of conservation, any amount of water harvesting should be fully funded somehow through grant money, through any way that's possible, incentives, big incentives. But other kinds of industry will use a lot less water. And we can't even have a new subdivision. Wilcox is really hurting for houses for people. Benson doesn't have that problem right now. They don't have any restrictions on water that's used on the lower San Pedro River. So they are filling out some old plats that have been filed. That's why they're booming over there with houses. So what do you want? Do you want people here, or do you want industry here, or what do you want over here? That's the conversations, because again, there's only so much water left. And what are you going to do with that precious resource going forward? Thank you.
The type of growth and economic development here in the Sulphur Springs Valley needs to align with who Cochise County is and what we are. Again, we have three major industries here. We have agriculture, tourism, and Fort Huachuca, and we can't bring in an industry that's going to suck the water away from agriculture, but we can add tourism to agriculture and create agritourism. We do have, just to clarify, we do actually have 3 processing plants here in Cochise County for cattle, one in Wilcox, one here on Perch Road and 191, and another custom processing plant down here in Elfrida. The one here in Cochise, Birch and 191, I believe, they have up to 15 employees or something like that. They are a USDA packing house. The Wilcox packing house is Arizona Department of Agriculture approved, and you can buy and sell meat there. But we do need to make sure that what we approve for industry here, again, has either a low water usage, we have to take that water usage into consideration, or we have to figure out what we're gonna balance that with. So it just needs to align with who and what we are as a county.
So I'm just gonna first clarify a couple statements. Well, I'll tell you what we want here. We want to maintain the natural beauty, which is an incredibly sacred area of the Dragoon Mountains and the Chiricahua Mountains. That's why we live here. And to do that, I feel the best way is to promote tourism, and we could promote industries that encourage mindful use of water, like tech, like Frank had said, and renewable energy sectors perhaps, but certain types of agriculture that could be drought resistant. The developments that we should ever encourage would have to have such a different kind of, like a different vision, maybe like John Riggs over at Mare Pasture. I don't know if anyone has ever taken a look at his plan for developing the area over by the Riggs Ranch, by the Chiricahuas. It's really interesting. It's self-sustaining. it has recharge pods and it recharges. It's just a contained little village. So those are things that we should look to in the future. For now, we really need to look at any development has to be sustainable. And would have to have an environmental impact statement by any industry that wants to come here, and it would have to have a neighborhood impact statements that are transparent to the public before they start digging, which hasn't always happened in the past. I just wanted to also mention that 2014, of course, we do have a natural groundwater depletion. Wells, the static water level, it can go up sometimes, it can go down, but the most significant decline was from 2014, when the mega factory farm came in. The water levels there were depleting at 5 to 7 feet a year around 2017. It has now doubled that. It's about 15 feet a year. So last time we checked to drill, we've never drilled a well. We were silly and we opened a restaurant instead. But if we drilled a well down,
time is up, so.
750 feet.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
I think you're.
Yeah, Joyce.
I think Joyce is going to take this question. Just a little preface to this question. In the past 10 to 15 years, you've heard the candidates allude to this. There's been a transition from mostly small family-owned farms, orchards, ranches, many of which are multi-generational, towards a smaller number of large investor-owned industrial farming, feedlot, orchard operations, which have very few local residents, which hire very few local residents, and in many cases send their profits out of state. The size and high activity associated with these types of operations can lead to negative impacts on local residents and county infrastructure. What role should the county take in mitigating the negative impact of these operations on road maintenance, increased dust storm runoff, etc.?
Well, I don't know that they don't have very many codes or anything related to agriculture. Agriculture is pretty much, you just go out and do it. It's not regulated. And so these increasing problems with dust and light pollution, because ag is exempt from light pollution codes, maybe that all needs to change. Maybe it needs to change really fast as far as, of course, you can't institute something and then expect current landowners to take up on that. But I was so sad to realize that a lot of these codes that apply all across the county do not apply to agriculture, and that's the biggest thing going on over here, and that's sad. But maybe we can prevent some of this from happening in the future, and I don't know. I mean, Cochise County just raised the property rate, property tax, and so it is going to take some digging into the budget to see, well, what do we want to do about all this dust pollution? I mean, are we going to spread water on it? I don't think that's going to work. There's already, they already talk about taking roads out of the county system, letting them go back to dirt. So I don't know what the solution would be to that. That's another huge issue that needs to be looked at and discussed, because I don't know that that's been talked about at all at a county level. And I would definitely, that would be one of the first things that we try to do, is get in there and see what we can do for the residents that are being impacted today with these issues. And this is a big issue over here, and I'm just so thankful to all of you for allowing us to speak about it. And I've learned a lot today. Thank you.
I'd say this question's a little bit loaded, but I think I understand where you're going with it. The amount of equipment required to run 100 small farms versus running one large farm that encompasses 100 can actually be less than what one farm can do. So I'm not here to demonize or defend anybody. But I look at this bottle as a quarter full, not 3/4 empty. So what I see being able to go to one person or one corporation or one, and try and mitigate a large problem by talking to one person. And that's kind of where I'm going with that. The county should be mitigating the negative impact of these heavy trucks on the road. We should be mitigating any kind of dust. We should be mitigating that storm runoff. But now we can go to one person, or we can go to 10 people, or we can go to 15 people, versus having to go to 150 or 135 or 300 people. And we can target that enforcement a lot easier now. Like I said, I'm an optimist. It's a quarter full.
So the headline reads, "Rural Communities and Family Farming Under Attack." And that headline was from a paper in Minnesota. Okay. So there's multiple issues with this, not just the water. We have trucks coming down our roads, our highway, increasing every day. How about a road maintenance fund? How about for large industrial farming operations to have to put into a road maintenance fund? How about that same greatest user of the groundwater to set up wells for people whose wells are going dry, to go and haul water? You know, we can't force anyone to do that, and as county supervisors, of course, you don't really have control over that, but you could encourage it. Don't they have a moral obligation to do so? I think we should establish stricter zoning regulations and permits to ensure that they adhere to environmental and community standards. And I think Chris Mays is working on that, and that's a great thing. And guys, this is not a partisan issue at all. We have to come together on this. It affects everybody. The dust control measures, perhaps some things like vegetation buffers, or how about paving? If you're driving those trucks down dirt roads, your access roads, why wouldn't that be a requirement for you to have to pave those roads? The dust increase here has been really just devastating. Stormwater management, perhaps mandating that these operations develop and maintain stormwater management to reduce runoff, okay? We've got a real problem with that, and it's not being discussed because it's being hidden. And that's something to do with the Turkey Creek area. So we've got to have monitoring in that regard. We've got a lot of rules and regulations already on the books that are not being followed up on. So I'm not a person that wants more rules. I am pretty consciously conservative. I think we all moved here to do what we want on our land without encroaching on anyone else or harming anyone else's property values, and within regulation. But I'm not for more rules, but I think we have to look at possible zoning problems that we have.
Thank you, Patsy.
Of course, there's some things the county can do to mitigate, particularly the dust and the road situation. I've talked to several of the industries around here that utilize the roads. One of the problems they have is some of them have actually offered to pave the roads at their own expense. And the county said, no, it's a county road, we're not going to let you pave it. If the county abandoned the road, they would allow them to pave it. But the county says, no, this is a county road, we're not going to abandon it, you've got to follow our rules. And no, by the way, we don't have any money. Arizona distributes the gas tax through the Highway User Revenue Fund, the HERF money. We only get about 10 million in HERF funding. We get about 3 million in vehicle license tax from everybody that registers their car here. That is peanuts to pave roads, ladies and gentlemen, peanuts to pave roads. If you have a private company that's willing to pay to pave a road, I cannot for the life of me understand why the county will not let them pave a road. If they're gonna pay out of their own pocket and not hit the taxpayers. It's stupid. That's one of the things the county does right now because they're following the rules. Another is a sort of a public-private partnership, right? Where maybe that company will do the excavation and the road prep and then the county just paves it. There's been several companies in the area here that have offered that and the county has refused to participate in that as well because they say, no, it's our roads, we're gonna pay the full cost on that. We, if one of us is lucky enough to serve on the Board of Supervisors, can change that. And change that policy and say, no, if you have a private industry that wants to pave their own road, let them pave their own road to reduce dust, to reduce all the other aspects that go with that, and damages. The other piece of it is we gotta get the feds to quit stealing our highway money, and the federal government stole $800 million of Arizona's highway money to build electric vehicle charging stations in 90 other states and cities rather than Arizona. That money was supposed to come to us to pave roads. ADOT had to reduce their funding to pave roads in Arizona because the feds stole our gas tax money to go build charging stations. Not a big fan of charging stations, if you haven't figured that out. But this is some of the stuff we have to do working with our state and federal representatives. You paid that tax. It should come back here instead of being swiped and given to other states or going to Elon Musk or whoever gets it.
All right,
We'll go on to
Yeah.
our,
the next question, right?
the next question, right? So I wanted to remind everyone that we passed out the index cards. So if any questions come to mind, just hold your hand up and Hazard or Gray will come by and pick it up.
And they don't have to be on the water, they don't have to be specific to water too. They could be general questions.
Right, so there's a few more questions we wanted to get to before we turn it to the audience. I just want to remind everybody about that.
Yeah, so you just ended,
So
right?
our next question, which is going to Jacob. Do you see a potential lithium mining operation in the Wilcox Playa as a threat or an opportunity for the region? Explain your position.
I don't see a potential lithium mining operation as feasible in our region. I understand that they've been doing core drilling and several exploratory holes over on the east side of the dry lake bed, front lake bed, and this is the third company that is Canadian-based company that has come down and tried to sell shares in their exploration. So I don't see it as feasible, one. Two, I would see it as a threat, not necessarily an opportunity, because of the water issues and environmental issues that would come with that. I don't see it bringing in enough jobs. I don't see it bringing in enough economic revenue to balance out what the negatives would be. And thirdly, so those are my personal opinions. As far as a county supervisor, there wouldn't be a whole lot that we could do about it other than make sure that the infrastructure was paid for their presence here. So they're right now drilling on BLM land, which is, that would be a federal permit that they'd have to get that wouldn't go through the county. And of course, any mining in Arizona is dictated by the Arizona mine inspectors. So there's not a whole lot that we could do other than make sure that we A, know what's happening, and B, try and plan for any issues that would come up. And we know that there would be issues come up, but we can at least plan for them.
So there's a saying in Vancouver about mining companies on the Vancouver Stock Exchange. that typically what they're doing is mining for investors. So that being said, I really think it's a great thing that everyone grouped really quickly when we heard this the first time, and that is really why we need transparency and the information to get out to the public. We need a better system of communications, perhaps, to get a coalition together, because there are strength in numbers, and it just means that it's a message. It's sending a message to corporations and companies coming here that we're, you know, we're just not gonna accept everything that they want to do here. So it's really good to be able to have the group that spearheaded this campaign. Also, like Jacob, I don't think it's feasible. We have really a lot of wind out there on the playa. We can see that on windy days. I just can't see how it would be possible to have anything mined out there. The extraction of lithium also requires a lot of water, and I can't see how that could be possible. I think it could come down to environmental reasons, protection of, you know, our tourism, our sandhill cranes and wings over Wilcox. That's a big draw. That's a big moneymaker for Wilcox. So I think if anything were to proceed, I would spearhead that avenue. Supervisors, while the federal government conducts environmental reviews, supervisors can push for thorough assessments, so we can campaign for that.
So to me, it's a threat, and I think it's bad to bring a lithium mine in here. And I'm not a fan at all of this idea. Again, all of the lithium that would get mined is going towards what I believe are inefficient ways of creating energy. And you know, with all due respect to the electric vehicle industry out there, by the time, if you look at the mining that requires to go into the lithium, the copper, the steel, the molybdenum, everything that goes into an electric car, and if you plug your car into a solar panel every day, which you're going to need a big solar panel to recharge that car, it's going to take you 7 years to become energy neutral. Just be honest, right? They're actually coal-burning cars, not electric cars, because they're burning electricity from coal-fired plants or oil-fired plants. Why would we give more money to pump water, and I think it's what, 6,000 gallons per pound is what it creates for 1 pound of lithium, something like that? It's a ridiculous number. It's 10,000 gallons?
No.
Or for 10 pounds?
For a ton.
It's ridiculous. Right, so it's not worth it. And there's a lot of other lithium mines throughout the world. Unfortunately, most of them are owned by China, and that's part of the problem, because the federal government has surrendered all of our mining to China, who now owns 95% of the rare earth and precious metals mining in the world. But why we want to put a mine here where we have no water to begin with, and we're going to pump that much water to just get 10 crummy pounds of lithium is beyond me. So as a supervisor, I would fight with it every way I could to prevent that mine from going in here. I think it's a bad idea, and with limited power I have, I will do whatever the utmost of that power to stop that mine from going in.
Well, I think we're all in agreement on this one. Same with me. I've been to some of the meetings having to do with the lithium mining operation that actually there isn't any lithium there. Maybe they're fudging their numbers. We don't really know. But again, that is another very poor use of the limited groundwater. And again, that would be groundwater. This county relies on groundwater 100%. And I just think that's a bad fit. And it made me think of the industrial agriculture that's going on here, that they're in the state they originated from. On the western side of that state, there are towns and areas that have fought. They're coming in to do what they do, which is mine groundwater. And it's worked. It's worked to keep some things away. So a lot, public uproar is a big thing. And yes, they're going to say we're going to have this many jobs and this much, retail sales and all that. But is it worth the limited amount of groundwater that's left, and I don't think so. Plus, it is upwind from the precious commodity of those beautiful vineyards, which are not as water intensive as some of the other agriculture that's going on, plus that's tourism. And now I've heard that lithium dust is actually not toxic, but there's lots of salts on that playa, and I think the people that live around the playa probably have an understanding of what happens when the wind blows. And just add to that, and lithium is evaporated out of pools of water. So there's toxic water then that the migrating birds may use, and that's just not a good fit. And there are other better locations for a lithium mine than here. Thank you.
Next question, okay. All right, this will be our last official question, then we'll get to the audience questions. All right, so what role can the county play in making sure any new mining operations in this region will not threaten our groundwater resources, negatively impact our natural environment and our rural quality of life? So focus on what the county might be able to do to mitigate this or stop it.
So the county, while it doesn't have direct authority, it has limited authority over mining activities on federal land. As these lands are governed by the federal government, but there are a few things that might be looked at that the county can do, like having zoning buffers. Supervisors might create zoning regulations that establish buffer zones around our communities. And limit certain types of activities, including mining, that can occur near residential areas. This can help protect our communities. Local land use planning, another thing to look at with planning and zoning. We can't really control the federal land though, so that's we can advocate and we can take our arguments and all of our data and all of our community problems to the state and federal officials to press for not mining in our areas. Of course, just like this, organize public hearings, get the public involved. That's really the important thing. And collaboration with those other agencies. Just engaging the community and educating. And not everyone's on Facebook or Nextdoor. So we need to look at better communication systems to make sure everyone in the communities are knowing what's happening in their neighborhoods. We can push through assessments that take local community concerns into account. And I think that's why this plan, this conversation right now is so important, and to get feedback from the community.
So I remember when I was in the legislature, the mine that was going in Pima County, the Santa Rita mine out there off of 83, and the challenges that the county posed. One of the big ones was road access. And prohibiting through various methods the ability of a mine to run a road out to hook up to 83 or to any of the other municipal roads was one method that they used to slow that down. Dust control rules, working with the state and DEQ to put monitors up there and trigger fines and all sorts of stuff. But what the big thing was, and I think Patsy alluded to this earlier, is a lot of these efforts are sort of driven by investors. And if the investors get the notion that it's going to be very painful, expensive, and take a long, long time, they don't put a lot of money in that investment. Most investors want a return after about 3 to 5 years. If they don't see a return on investment in 3 to 5 years, they tend not to make that investment. So the way to discourage it is to create a groundswell of opposition at the local county and state level that the investors see, and then that they say, well, you know what, this is gonna be too much of a squeeze to get juice out of, and we're just gonna go somewhere else. I mean, that's really the strategy. That's how you stop them from putting the mine in. You just make it slow and painful, and then the investors will go somewhere else. But the county really, that's all we can do is maybe some of these small little ancillary zoning and road access things to try to make it difficult for them, and then a combination of other outrage from the community, environmental groups suing the living daylights out of them, all sorts of things like that are the things that chase investors away.
That was it, right?
Yeah, I
Oh,
think that.
now, from the audience.
Yeah, so
We still need to answer that one.
Oh, do you? Well, I thought I was last.
No.
Oh, these other two, I'm so
It's all
sorry.
right.
I've been losing track of the.
I know,
I
me
lost
too.
track long ago.
Sorry.
Okay, you can start timing me now. Okay, the lithium mine, yes. According to this here report from WDR released December of last year, mining in this basin accounts for, from 2022, 2,237 acre feet. It's second only to a dairy that pulls out 2,779 acre feet of water. Okay, and that's one of the bigger uses. So there is already a mine in place up off Johnson Road, a copper mine, and it draws water from this basin. It's in the watershed. So they're expanding, and I think we could ask them for some transparency on what they're doing, because most mines, copper mines, have to be de-watered, meaning they have to pump out the water so they can get to the rock without having their equipment submerged in water. And that is the biggest problem with mining. You know, down in the Patagonia Hills, they're gonna de-water to get magnesium and other rare elements out of there. But that's the main problem, and of course the tailings, the waste afterwards. But de-watering, and that water it's used, but it's not used, I mean, it's allowed to run off also. It's a waste of this precious aquifer here. So transparency with the mining company. As a county supervisor, I would definitely like a tour of that facility. I would want some facts, simply because you're gonna be a good neighbor. Are you gonna be a good neighbor, or aren't you gonna be a good neighbor? And I think that's the line I would take with anybody here, is be a good neighbor. I know some people at the large industrial agricultural firm here have begun to question. You know, some people are asking, have you been a good neighbor? I think there's a lot to say about that for going forward. Just, that's all we can do at a county level. Thank you.
Historically, Cochise County's been very big on mining. Of course, that's how we got our start. Of course, things have changed a little bit since then, and mining is like sixth on the economic drivers or fifth or sixth, something like that, for what actually makes Cochise County tick anymore. But I would just go back to that sitting down and planning, because as I stated before, if we can plan, if we can all get together and have an idea on what kind of water restrictions that we want here in this basin, and we can go and get that legislated, and so that the state now has those legislative restrictions on our watershed, on our area, then it protects everybody. But as far as what the county supervisors can do, you know, as was stated by a couple of the others, light pollution, building permits, building codes, we can advocate, we can go out and we can meet with the mining companies and make sure that they are going to be. But the biggest thing that we can do is get with everybody and make sure that everybody at least in the immediate area, even beyond, is notified of any kind of mining activity, is notified of that, because every mining operation that comes in has to go through NEPA. They have to go through the National Environmental Protection Act. And so they have to get public input every time they want to do something. And when I said that we can't do anything as far as county supervisors, you as the population here can. And if we can get that information out to you in a timely manner so that you can make those objections or you can actually find out what's going on, then we're all in it together.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. So I think the next question will start with Frank. And these are the audience questions, and we've kind of filtered through. Some of them were submitted earlier, and some of the questions have been addressed already. So it's been a challenge picking out the questions. But I want to start with one that doesn't have anything to do with water. Yeah, sorry, but we figured we'll mix it up a little here. So recently, the Department of Defense and the U.S. Air Force announced plans to change the rules around that govern the overfly zone over this part of the state. It's not just here in Arizona. I believe it also extends into eastern New Mexico. But some of that will involve lowering the limits that the planes can fly when they're during their practice, the noise level that they can create, the types of planes, as well as dropping some of the flat kind of stuff they do for the targeting and so forth. So I'm assuming most of you have heard of that or are aware of this situation. So could you just tell us how you feel about that? I know it's out of the hands of the county, but the county could take a position on this in terms of how it impacts quality of life, environment, and so forth.
I'm a little biased on this one because when I was in Afghanistan and Iraq, I relied on air cover quite a bit to provide close air support for me. And it's something near and dear to my heart because I'm sitting here today because of that capability. Those guys have to train. They have to train somewhere. The ability to train in realistic environments is very difficult in the United States because of all the restrictions. So it's a challenge to find that balance. And again, some of you that live around here, again, I just live off of Dragoon Road there. I am in the helicopter corridor of the world, and I'm constantly got Chinook helicopters, Black Hawk, flying literally right over my house all the time. So I'm used to it, so to speak. I'm used to it from my 20 years in the military, and I'm used to it for the last 10 years having them fly over my house. As long as they're not going supersonic, below 10,000 feet and busting everybody's windows, and they will bust your windows if they do that. And as long as they're not dropping chaff and flares in your backyard catching your grass on fire, I think there's a way that we could work with the Air Force to sort of mitigate this and make sure that when they do go supersonic or when they do drop chaff and flares, it's over areas that are not populated, like the dry lake bed or some parts of the mountains or some of these other areas where there isn't much. But getting them to avoid residential dense areas is probably the approach to make, and that's what I would have the input on if I had the opportunity to have input on where they do that training.
I mean, you're talking about the Tombstone MOA.
Yes.
And I don't think it extends up to District 3. I don't think it does. I think it's all in District 2.
No.
Is it? Okay. I would have to overlay that map onto District 3 and make sure that, I know they're planning an extension north, but I don't know if the current MOA, anyway, the current MOA has been used traditionally for lots of things. And I was on the Fort Huachuca Sentinel Landscapes Partnership meetings when I was in Huachuca City. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what the fort wants, Fort Huachuca as an army post, what they want to protect them. They want a lot of open space, a lot of conservation easements, a lot of water catchment, a lot of erosion control. They are all in favor of things like that. Now the Air Force has a whole different parameter here. And they have not allowed these things before. Lower to the ground flights 100 feet above the ground. Oh, that's alarming. And right over the Chiricahuas, one of our highest peaks down here, and a very precious location. And they're going to be they want to drop chaff, which is a very fine fiberglass with aluminum and that kind of thing onto the ground. Who knows? It's never happened. They're not allowed to do it right now. So, I mean, we're talking toxic waste on some of the most pristine areas of the state. And then flares. Flares are wrapped in Teflon wrappers. Teflon. Anyone know what Teflon's made of? PFAS. Heard of PFAS? talk about a water contaminant you can't get out of your water without very, very expensive treatments. So no, flares over a zone that's in drought, I don't think so. So I am definitely not in favor of that, and I think they need to hear from the people, and they have already. There's been a lot of comments. I listened to one of their virtual meetings, and it's like, nobody's gonna be in favor. On Facebook, you might see people in favor because they don't actually live under the Tombstone MOA. Anyway, that is my take on that, and yeah, more power to, Fort Huachuca. I really do appreciate Fort Huachuca's, electronic proving ground and the things that they put into place with their Sentinel Landscapes program. I think they've done an amazing job. So, and some of it does extend over here. Thank you.
Fort Huachuca, Davis-Monthan, we've got 2 large bases within quick flights of here. Obviously, the dry lake bed has been used clear back to World War II for a bombing range. And then Fort Huachuca has a lot of open space where they're doing all their maneuvers. Why do they need to extend over our houses? Why do they need to extend over, our neighborhoods? And truth be told, like has been mentioned, I'm not all that excited about flares being dropped on my ranch land. So I'm not for it, but the way that we can work against it is like I said on one of these other answers, is they all have to go through the public comment period. We all need to get together. We all need to circulate these petitions and make sure that our voices are heard.
And that's the thing about having your voices heard and having the communication. And I think there was a lot of, almost like a cover-up about this situation. There were no public meetings in Cochise County. And we need to voice our displeasure with that. I believe, as Americans, we understand the need for the Air Force to practice. We've been living with that to some degree for years here. Not at that level. I really feel at that level, it's an existential threat to the wildlife and the ecosystems of the Chiricahuas. It's going to ruin our area. It'll ruin our tourism. The B&Bs, people come here to the stronghold. There's a Buddhist camp there, a Buddhist retreat.